Israeli army. Now, you can have a view either way. He gave his reasons. And to discuss all of this, including the impact of this war on civilians, we're joined by Mohammed Daniel. He grew up in North London and converted from Judaism to Islam in 1998. His journey to Islam began with a trip to Palestine in 1988. He's a poet who has written extensively on Palestine. Brother Mohammed, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, wa alaikum assalam. Mohammed, we'll come on to your poetry because I do like poetry, and I think obviously some of yours must be quite impactful. But in terms of the war that's taking place right now on all the civilians and the death and destruction that we're seeing, how do you feel as somebody who's got quite a connection to Palestine, to Palestinians?
Yeah, I mean it's devastating on any level. But for me, obviously, there's a very personal connection there. In that, when I was very young, when I was 17, I spent time not in Gaza, but in a basically a settlement, a small farm,
Yes.
very close to Gaza, in Israel itself. And I was working with Gazans, and they basically gave me dawah, and that was where I first was introduced to Islam. So I probably wouldn't be Muslim if it wasn't for Gazans. So that's quite a big thing, and yeah.
Yeah, and you said something that you're working, or you were in settlements working with Gazans who were working there. Tell us a little bit more about it. Give us some context, because I've been covering this for the last 2 months, and we speak about settlements, we speak about Israeli communities, but we never really get an insight from the Israeli perspective. And I don't want to put you in a place where you perhaps are uncomfortable. It's just to give us some how are these communities how do they work?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not uncomfortable at all. I mean, it depends what you see as a settlement. So I would say the whole of Israel is a settlement on Palestine. Israel is built on Palestine, and they're very open about it. I mean, there's nothing hidden. There's very much always been an agenda to create Israel on Palestine. That was going right back to Herzl, right, from the inception of the Zionist project. So, but yeah, I mean, there's different lines, and there's the 67 lines that were created, and the farm that I worked on, the settlement, is kind of like a kibbutz. They call it a moshav, in that. So you volunteer, but you get paid a bit, whereas kibbutzes, you volunteer and you don't get paid anything. And there's lots of Westerners who go there, and I went there basically as a traveller, as a young guy. I worked a summer in Greece on beaches and stuff, and I just didn't want to come back to England for various reasons. So I just went over there, got the boat with some guys I met from Piraeus in Greece to Haifa, and then I ran out of money. So I went and worked in Tel Aviv first for a few months.
Yeah.
And I worked there as well with Palestinians. And I suppose it's like I said when I came on last time as well, is that, and many people I think have said, that when you go there, especially if you go to obviously the Palestinian territories, but even in Israel itself, if you go there and you're not part of a Zionist indoctrination group where they closet you, you just go there as a normal person and you open your eyes and your ears, then you see the reality of what's going on, because Palestinians are working and in the sort of laboring jobs and in the kitchens and all of these things. So when I worked in those types of jobs, I was working with Palestinians, and we would talk, and they would say to me, "We don't hate Jews, we just want our land back." Simple as that.
Yes.
And if my cousin took as I think Ahmed Yassin said, if my cousin took my land, I would fight him for it. And my brother took my land, I'd fight him for it. It's nothing to do with religion. It's nothing to do with a racist thing. so that opened my eyes a lot. And then I went with the money that I got from working in the kitchens in Tel Aviv. I traveled through Egypt, and to be honest, that was a great dawah as well.
Mm.
Seeing the hearing the adhan and seeing the piety of the people touched me. And then I ran out of money again, so I came back through the Rafah border,
Okay.
which at that time was Israeli. We're talking about 87, 88.
Yeah.
And so they let me back in, and I found a job in a moshav, which was near this farm. It's basically a settlement near the Gaza border.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time I was working with Palestinians and Gazans, and they would come in. It was the time of the first Intifada, so often there was a curfew, and they weren't allowed back. So one brother, Mahmoud, he used to stay in I had like a little servant's shack out the back of the Israelis' boss's house. And he was so kind to me, and I would watch him pray. I didn't pray because I wasn't Muslim, but it touched my heart,
Yes.
watching him and his kindness to me. And we would pick tomatoes all day, but they wouldn't give us any tomatoes. They were so tight. So we would put tomatoes, we would put tomatoes in our pockets and go back to our little shack, and then we would cook shakshuka,
Yeah.
And wallahi, I've never tasted shakshuka as good as what Mahmoud used to make.
Yeah. It is beautiful food.
On our little stove. And that gave me a great dawah, because at the same time as that was happening, the Israeli boss, who knew I was Jewish at the time, didn't treat me well. I don't know why. I remember one night standing outside his house asking for something, and I was feeling quite lonely. I was only young. I was missing my family. I was missing home. And it was a Friday night, and Jews have big meal on a Friday night, like chicken and stuff. And I could smell it in his house. And he saw me, and he knew that. And you could see that he was thinking that. And he didn't invite me in. He didn't say anything. So I was juxtaposing that against these Palestinians who were treating me so kindly. And the Israelis were saying to me, don't share food with them. Don't share water with them. They're dirty Arabs and stuff. And obviously that taught me a lot. That was a real lesson in what's going on, and in the difference between these people. Not to say there aren't any good Israelis or something like that, or there aren't any bad Palestinians, but that was the experience I had. And that stayed with me for a long time.
How do you think Jewish migrants who came into Israel, and obviously their families now live in Israel, do they feel the weight of history on them? I mean, obviously we know the ones that are really religious, they know that it's there. They believe that it's part of their homecoming and they're coming back to their land, ancestral homes. But in terms of those that aren't particularly religious, I suppose they'll sort of loosely observe the Jewish religious practices. Do they feel anything for the Palestinians at all in terms of this is their land and we've taken it, or is there simply no guilt complex and that's why they can be so brutal?
Yeah, I mean, some of them do, but unfortunately they're in the minority. People like Gideon Levy, I think you've had on this show.
Yeah,
you had him on. So people like that. But look at the abuse he gets for what he writes, and he, when he for whatever he says when he talks about Palestinians being equal humans, and this is the problem. This is what they've done very successfully to their population, which is such a scary thing. Is that they've dehumanized the Palestinians. I was watching just now, actually, this morning, the interview with Ghassan Abu Sitta, the doctor who was in Gaza, and he was saying to kill 7,000 children, or 8,000, or however many it is now, and to have that be accepted by your population and by the world, what they've done is unchild them.
Yes,
which is a chilling thing, right? And that's what they've done, and that's how you've got this brutality, and that's how you've got these soldiers going in and raping, rampaging and pillaging and treating people like animals, shooting children and telling their mothers to put them down and walk on past the checkpoint, and just horrific things, something like out of a horror movie, right? And it's because the people, they've dehumanized them. Otherwise, the population wouldn't accept it. What's really scary to me, which is what I wrote my latest poem about, which I would like to say at some point, is how the world seems to be going along with that dehumanization. Or maybe not, maybe they're not, maybe the people of the world aren't, but the leaders are. And, vetoing ceasefires to stop children being killed, it's beyond belief. And to me, that's quite scary. I think we live in a dangerous time, because if we can watch this televised genocide like this and just get on with our daily lives, then, who's next?
Yeah, and let's do that. Let's move on to your writings. You just mentioned a piece there. What is that about?
Well, shall I read it?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Bismillah. What a world is this, where children are killed and people vote to kill more? What leaders are these who dispute numbers dead as if it's a game with a score? You debate and resolve but refuse to condemn, despite the difference it could make. If you're so convinced there should be no ceasefire, then why does your hand start to shake? What a time is this, where we watch genocide, then scroll down for cooking tips? How dangerous it is to be desensitized to the horrors we soon learn to skip. Because life must go on, if only for some. But tell me, what would you do when the dust settles down on the burial ground and they turn their attention to you?
Well, that was very powerful. That was very powerful. I think, were you referring to social media when you said you search for cooking tips and you're also seeing the destruction?
Yeah.
And that's me. It really is on my social media
All
feed.
of us. Yeah. It's all of us. And I feel I've noticed my own sensitivity is less now.
Yeah.
Like when it started, after October 7th, and we were devastated. My whole family was devastated. We just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing worse images.
Worse.
And yet we're not as devastated. And that's scary. That is scary, that we're becoming used to it. And that, and on Instagram, and then you scroll down and then you've got cooking tips and you're like, oh, that's a nice cooking tip. And you're thinking, this is it's not good. It's not good.
People do say, Mohammed, that social media has actually really propelled the Palestinian narrative into the hearts of billions of people around the world. Despite having hardly any budget, the Palestinians have, beaten, is that the right word? I don't know. But anyway, has certainly, their narrative is way more pronounced than the millions or the billions that the Americans and the Israelis have spent pushing their narrative. What does that tell you about human societies?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's a massive difference, this generation, Gen Z or whatever. And, that's the positive side of the social media, right? Is that we've got people like Motaz, like Bisan, these people. We feel like we know them, right? We're following them. They're in Gaza. I mean, this is incredible journalism, what they're doing, right? Yeah. And they're people, Gazans on the ground. And the young generation are seeing it. Like my kids, they're all seeing it. Like nobody's fooled now. Like 20 years ago or whatever, when they could control the media to that extent that people didn't know what's going on, they can't do that now. So the people around the world, especially the young people, are fully conscious of what's going on. And I think I was watching the Islam channel actually yesterday, and Lauren Booth was on, and she was saying there was a poll, I don't know if you saw that, of I think it was 16 to 24-year-olds in America who think that Hamas should take over Israel. 80% of them think that, which is like, it's incredible. I mean, that whether you think that's right or wrong, to have that come is because people are just seeing the truth. They're seeing, one side is killing children and the other side is what? Being killed. Like, it's not happening both ways, right? It's pretty obvious. So I think society in general is there's a big groundswell coming up of truth and of understanding it. But then I think people feel impotent. we all feel impotent, right? Because
Yeah.
whoever it is who's really in control, like, you know, the guy who vetoed the ceasefire and then his hands shook, which I mentioned in that poem, obviously he's not the one in control. He's doing the bidding. So who's in control? Who is allowing this and propagating this disgusting genocide? That's another story.
You know, Mohammed, when I was doing history at school, I don't know whether they still do, but we were taught the poetry of Wilfred Owen in World War One. And initially, when I started reading that, I found it so boring. There was no, I couldn't understand it. But as I got more and more into the book, and the teacher was explaining, you know, the lessons were built on one on top of the other. It really struck me how powerful his pen was. And I've always found poetry to be a reflection of the human soul. You know, we know Islam has a huge history of poetry and a huge tradition of poetry. The Arabs themselves, you know, were great purveyors of poetry, even before the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and certainly after that, it just went to a different level. In your role as a poet, how do you want to contribute to what's currently taking place? Is it to convince people that the Palestinians are victims? Is it to convince people that the Israelis are inhuman? Is it to bring peace into the region? Because obviously you've got Jewish heritage. And despite how monstrous some of these people are, there are some really, really good Jews and Israelis. And I know that. What is your sort of reason for doing poetry?
Well, I mean, it's not my job.
I get that.
Oh, it'd be good if it was.
Maybe it will be.
Inshallah. Yeah. I don't know. I've always written. You know, even when I was a kid, I used to write. I love rhymes. I love stuff that rhymes. Yeah. And you know, we have this idea that maybe not, you know, I think it's a recent thing, isn't it? Maybe that rhymes are things that rhyme have to be about stuff that is fun and things. There's a bit of a perception like that. But as you say, you go to war poetry and the past, and that wasn't the case at all. And the big thing that inspires me is the Quran, because the Quran is the most, you know, deep and beautiful book. It changed my life. It's changed so many Muslims' lives, isn't it? And it rhymes. You know, the rhymes in the Quran are amazing. And I've been studying Arabic quite intensively for the last few years.
Yes.
And the deeper and deeper you get into the Arabic, the more incredible it is. And incredible it is that this Qafiyya, I think it is, the rhyme in Arabic, is also about meanings that are so deep and so serious and so beautiful. And so that's kind of where I'm at the moment with my poetry, is making things that rhyme and that attract people's ear because they're rhyming, you know, make people listen and concentrate, but they're about serious topics. And at the moment, I can't conceive of anything else to write about apart from Palestine, because it's such a big thing, and also because my brothers and sisters in Gaza are suffering, and because they gave me so much in terms of helping me to start on my journey towards Islam. So it's kind of maybe something I've got to offer them, or Allah, but for them, if it will be accepted. And it's a way to speak, you know, and it's to anybody who wants to listen. And I try to write in a way that anybody who's human can listen. Like, I'm not saying, oh, down with the whatever. It's more about like, come to yourself, you know, come think about this. Like, you're human, we're human, because this is the big thing that my parents always taught me, is that we're human. All humans are the same.
Yes.
And it's only recently, I was talking to my mum the other day, and I was saying, how is it that there's all these Jews who grew up like me, nice middle class North London upbringing, and yet there's a whole load of them gone off to join the IDF. Even some of the spokespeople for the Israeli army grew up in, I think one of them grew up in Kenton. You know, and it's like, what's going on? And then I realized they didn't have the same upbringing as me. That's the problem. They weren't brought up like my parents brought me up, that all human beings are equal, you know, no matter what your color or your faith. They weren't brought up like that. And this is the problem, is people are getting brainwashed and brought up in a way that makes them racist.
Yeah, very, very, very powerful, very sad there. Before we go to the break, Mohammed, what's your hope? Obviously, immediately we want the cessation of this war on the civilians. We want killing to end, and obviously for people to get aid and the hospitals to be restocked and food to get in so people can nourish themselves. But what's your longer term aim for both Jews, Muslims, Christians or Arabs and Israelis, however you wish to put them, for all the people that now live in that area?
Free Palestine. Free Palestine from the river to the sea. Wallahi, that's the solution. And Jews, Muslims, Christians can live together like they did before the Zionist project started. That's it. Inshallah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. You speak with a real intensity, and I could feel it from you. And hopefully I'll have you back at some point and we can continue this discussion.
Inshallah, it'll be a pleasure.
Thank you so much. That was Mohammed Daniel,